Hello, my name is Peyton Stewart, and this is my curriculum analysis for EDU 511. I chose to look at the Archdiocese of Philadelphia Common Core State Standards for the Study of Mathematics Algebra 1 Curriculum Map. This curriculum map was initially implemented for the 2011-2012 school year. When we want to look at a curriculum and analyze it, there are four key things that we want to look at. One are the foundations of the curriculum map. Two, the organization. Three, the content used within the curriculum map. And four, the assessments used to measure the curriculum map. The first one we want to look at are the foundations of the curriculum map. So, when we're looking at the foundations, we want to know who created the curriculum map. It is clearly stated in the second page of the curriculum map that it is a council of, or a committee of, several teachers, including Gerald Mayne, who is the chairperson, Lucille Pritchard, Ann Templeton, Mary Punzi, Brother Patrick Carney, Elizabeth Dowling, and Megan McGlinchey Corbell. So it clearly states who is in charge of creating this curriculum and who was in charge of handling things. Second is there a stated purpose for the curriculum map? Also on page 2, in the very first paragraph, it gives a clear definition of why they are going to the new curriculum map. It states that the Common Core state standards offer educators the opportunity to ensure that all students are equipped with the skills and knowledge they need to be successful in a globally competitive society. So in that sentence there, they lay out why it is important that they are switching to these Common Core standards, because they want their students to be ready for the global platform rather than just local or state. They want them to be ready for any level of competition or any level of business that they may venture to in their futures. Last thing we want to look at with the foundations is there a philosophy or any philosophical foundations? Looking through page 2, where they basically explain the entire curriculum, who came up with it, and why they came up with it, there's no real philosophy laid out other than that they state that they designed it using the Understand by Design format and coupled that with the Common Core state standards. So to me, there's no real philosophy behind it other than just how they looked at it and how they were going to implement the strategy. The second thing we want to look into when we are analyzing a curriculum map is the organization. So, first thing we want to ask when we're looking at organization is, are there any stated goals for each section? And clearly, on just about every single unit, there is clear stated goals, whether it be from the essential questions to the skills that they're going to require, clear down to the content standards that they state clear through the entire curriculum map. The standard basically lays out where the information is coming from, what they're going to learn, and then it goes into the essential questions, which is, what should the student know by the end, and then goes into the assessment, which aligns fairly closely to what the actual standard should be, and then it states any skills that they should know by the end of the sections. And once again, we want to know, are the content standards used? And as you can see, almost at the end of each unit, it does have a section for the content, which states every single standard used. Some are used multiple times throughout. Next is, how is subject matter organized or sequenced? So it's clear to see that in each section or each unit underneath the standard, it tells you where they are getting their past information. For instance, in Unit 1, it says that the students should know by the end of 8th grade that students should know how to solve linear equations in one variable and have applied graphical and algebraic methods to analyze and solve system of linear equations in two variables. So it clearly relates the information from past courses with what they are going to learn now. Another one that we want to look at is in Unit 4. It clearly states that they are basing their information and extending on the information from Unit 2. So they are clearly have it very well organized and have a plan for their sequence, and everything lines up in a logical manner. Next, we want to look into the content inside of the curriculum map. So, is the content appropriate? So as I stated just a second ago, it is very appropriate. It relates that what they learned in 8th grade has led into what they are learning in Section 1 or Unit 1, and then as well in Unit 2. It states that in earlier grades, they learned previous information that is going to help them with this new unit. And then once again in Unit 4, they look back into Unit 2 and extend on that information. So the content is very appropriate for the students. It makes logical sense in the order that they are going and lays out a very good foundation for the entire program. Next, is there any given timeline for how long is spent on different content and standards? From looking through the map, there is no real timeline for how long is spent on each unit, how long is spent on each standard, when the central questions are answered, or when they're going to be assessed. So as far as the content and the timeline goes, there is no stated timeline. There is nothing to go on as far as pacing. And so then we went into, is there any evidence of career opportunities? There are some stated opportunities within here. In Unit 1, they state that solving equations can be used in everyday life when trying to compute sales tax, rate of change, and finding measurements. So they do lay out some career opportunities throughout, just very basic, nothing too in-depth. For instance, also in Unit 2, they state that business and science can be related to the functions, and once again, it very briefly relates the content to outside real life opportunities, but it doesn't really go in depth with how it can be used in real life. So they could have maybe used some more specifics as opposed to just giving a general brief explanation. The fourth one is assessment. So when we're looking at assessment, we want to know, how does the assessment align with the content standards? So if you look through the content standards, they do align well with what the assessments say that the student should know. For instance, clear through the unit, and when you start with Unit 1, it has that the assessment, the students will demonstrate their capacity to reason quantitatively and interpret the structure of equations. And if you look through the content standards, it does say in SSE 1 that they will interpret expressions that represent the quantity in terms of its context. So they're very clearly, they are relating the assessment to the content standards. Next is, what type of assessment is being used, and are there any specified teaching strategies? Unfortunately, in this unit, in this curriculum map, there are no stated assessment types, whether it be formative, summative, or if there's going to be any rubrics used. So there is no real guideline to how they are assessing the students, but they do lay out very well what is being assessed. From reading through the unit plan, there are no specified teaching strategies. It just basically lays out what should be taught and what the essential questions are, but never really go into detail about how they are going to teach these strategies. So, After looking at those four, this leads me into my critique of this curriculum map. The first thing I want to critique is the content. As far as the content goes, the sequencing does make sense. So we're starting off on a good note. The content is what it should be. It touches every standard that should be touched. It relates it to past information, future information, and makes logical sense in how they go through the information. Next, kind of goes in with the sequencing, is the appropriateness of the lessons. So it clearly relates everything to the content standards laid out by the state. So they are following what should be taught. So everything is appropriate for their age level, and it makes logical sense in how they are putting everything together. Next, we move into the assessment, and this is where we start to see some issues. There are no signs of any assessment type. Under the assessment category, they do list what they are assessing, but it doesn't say whether there is a formative test, summative test, if there is a rubric used in grading. There is no laid measurement of how they are going to measure the assessment of each child. Then we go into learning activities and experiences. So once again, there are no stated activities throughout the curriculum map. And then there are no discernible experiences either. So there's nothing out there that shows that they're going to be relating this to real life or getting any real life experiences to help them connect the content to the real world. This is an issue because most students now want to relate all their real life experiences to what they're learning in school, and if they do not see that connection, they're not going to want to learn the material. Next is the timing. Once again, there is no indication of time for any section throughout the entire curriculum map. There is no timeline whether you spend a week, 2 weeks, a whole semester on a unit, or if it's a mixture of everything all at once. So, to me, they should go back through and at least put some type of timeline in there so that someone new to the system can follow along and be on the same page as everyone else. So there's no way to actually determine the pacing that is going on through the unit map, and that would make it hard for anyone to follow other than maybe the person or persons who actually formed the curriculum map. And last is the grouping. So there's no indication of group work on any level, whether it be small group, large group, or individual. There's no indication of whether they are doing it solely on their own, if they're going to have a chance for group projects, or anything along those lines. So if I were in charge of doing this curriculum map, I would go back through and lay out a little more specifically what type of work's going to be done, how is it going to be measured, are there going to be group projects, or is everything solely individual, and is there any time for practice for the students?